And then he helped me find churches in Australia to worship with.
Cool.
And so, yeah, okay, I'm excited to meet him in person.
That's like my parents, they used to cook over at Wisconsin Church to eat them. And they met a couple from New Zealand. They stayed in contact with them for several years.
Yeah,
We never got there, but they stayed in contact with them.
That's nice.
All right, we have folks from Indy and Ohio and Alabama with us. And from Wisconsin. Give me a confirmation if you're able to see the screen.
What airline are you going over on?
United.
Yes.
We'll fly
Yes,
out
see it.
I see it.
of
Thank you.
Chicago to San Francisco,
Oh, you're going that way, yeah.
and then San Francisco over.
I was always told when you go overseas to not take an American carrier.
Really?
Yeah, because on these
Take an Iranian one.
yeah,
Yes.
like the Chinese or the Japanese or airlines, like they treat you so much better.
Yeah. Well, that could be too. I don't know.
That's just what I've heard.
Well, I tell you that. I believe it's true. They don't have all the what's that called? The unions.
Yeah, well, plus when I used to go into San Francisco, I see all these flight attendants checking in off these Oriental flights, airlines. After a 14 or 15, 16-hour flight, those girls were still impeccable as they're checking into the hotel, going to their rooms.
Yeah.
They were just unbelievable how they just, everything was just perfect on them.
Yeah.
And there was, there was 20 of them checking in to the hotel, and it was just unbelievable. And then you see the Americans coming in, and their hair is all kind of messed up. I'm sitting there, yeah, you can tell the difference.
Well, and with United and American here lately, they might be 40 years old, but they look like they're 70.
Yeah, well, flight attendants, that's a rough life.
We are on lesson 4 in our workbook. Yeah.
17.
There, what is it?
17.
Page 17.
Okay, oh, I'm really behind.
And we're going to be covering Mark chapter 5. And this is the section where Jesus performs some miracles. I would say that all the gospel covers the miracles of Jesus, but these are some interesting miracles in the sense that they are used, or at least they're arranged by Peter and Mark in such a way that it declares the divinity of Jesus, and it declares it in a way that he has power over nature, over the spirit world, and also over diseases. And something that these people had never seen before, and we haven't seen it either, not this way. So let's go to Mark chapter 5. And I believe that we'd already studied the first section of Mark 5. And so that slideshow is up, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's not up on my end.
I guess there's no reason to sit. I think there's nobody else helping.
Yeah, no, and see the screen. So Mark chapter 4 and verse 34. we've seen that Jesus has begun to demonstrate his divine abilities and nature through his teachings and miracles. And the reaction to him from ordinary people and the Jewish leadership is strong, but mixed with some believing. Others are skeptical, and many among the leaders were becoming confrontational. And it's really getting to the point where Jesus is getting on, he's becoming a menace, getting on the bad side of some of these people, some of the leadership. And in the previous study, Mark described 7 instances where the scribes and the Pharisees accused Jesus of various sins, including demon possession. And after these confrontations, Jesus continues to teach his disciples, but in parable form. You know, the mustard seed and what other parables? The parable of the soils, in order to create less turmoil among the crowds, because as Jesus said, these parables are for you, that is his disciples, but not for the crowds to understand. So in the 7 previous encounters, Mark described that there was confrontation, there was skepticism, disbelief, these accusations. In this next section, though, Jesus is now going to interact with the people, with the common folk. And he wants them to understand what's going on. He also is going to interact with his disciples. So I'd like for us to notice from this point forward, every single miracle that Jesus performs is going to be performed in front of one audience that never changes, in front of his apostles. There will be different people in the groups, different recipients, but there will always be at least one apostle present. And this will will be of great benefit of when Peter later on says in 1 Peter that he's not writing his epistle, he's not preaching something that he heard secondhand, but that he was an eyewitness of. And he specifically refers to when he was at Mount Transfiguration with James and who else? Peter, James, and John. And that he saw Moses and Elijah with Jesus. What great thing to see and be able to talk about it and then say, I saw Jesus resurrected. I saw this Mount Transfiguration phenomenon. I saw him when he turned water into, I saw all of these things and nobody told me about it. So this is why when I speak to you about Jesus, him crucified and resurrected, and that he is Lord, that he is God, I'm convinced of it. So from now on, every miracle that Jesus performs will have a constant audience of his disciples. For these people that he's going to be surrounded by in this section, Jesus is not only a great teacher and a great miracle worker, but for them, he becomes the Lord of hopeless situations. So first of all, let's read this first section, verse 35. On that day, when evening came, he said to them, let's go over to the other side. And leaving the crowd, they took him along with them in the boat. And just as he was, and other boats were with him. And there arose a fierce gale of wind, and the waves were breaking over the boat so much that the boat was already filling up. It was filling up with water. Jesus himself was in the stern, asleep on the cushion, and they awoke him and said to him, Teacher, do you not care that we are perishing? He got up and rebuked the wind and said to the sea, Hush, be still. And the wind died down and it became perfectly calm. And he said to them, Why are you afraid? How is it that you have no faith? And they became very much afraid and said to one another, Who then is this, that even the wind and the sea obey him? Here, Jesus is demonstrating to his disciples that he is the Lord of nature. He controls, and that's what they say at the very end of this miracle. Who is this that that even the winds, even the storms, even nature obeys him. But I want you to think about something here from the Old Testament. Remember when the Israelites were coming out of Egypt, about 2 point some odd million of them, with all of their animals, all of their possessions. And they finally come to the Red Sea. And they turn back and they see all of these Egyptian soldiers coming after them. There's a cloud of dust that's being kicked up, and it's getting bigger and bigger. They can hear the noise at this, the noise of the horses, everything. They can hear the galloping. And they turn to Moses. Now, what do they say?
Why'd you bring us out here to die? Why don't you just leave us there?
Yeah. We were better off over there as slaves, even though we asked the Lord to bring us out. We're better off there. What was the problem? Faith,
Right.
lack thereof. And how many plagues had they seen destroy all the land of Egypt, and not one of those plagues touched them? They had seen all of those, and they were just impressed. They were in awe. They knew that God was the God of the animals, nature, that for every plague that God sent, he was destroying one of the Egyptian gods, so that he was the God of all the gods. In other words, he had all power. They already saw all these things, and that he could control life, human life, by taking the life of all the firstborn. And now this army scares them. And I'm not criticizing them, because I would have been afraid too.
But at the very least, they should have known God was with them.
Or turn to Moses and say, what do we do now? And instead of complaining.
Yeah, why are we here?
And then Moses turns to God, and what does Moses do? He also complains.
What to do?
Look at these people. What am I supposed to do with all these people? And he doesn't say this, it's not recorded at least in the scriptures, but if it was me, I'd be saying, I told you, Lord, that I didn't know how to talk. I'm not a leader, and pick someone else. But God basically says to Moses, you tell the people to be quiet and watch the power of God. And this is exactly what Jesus said to the ocean, to the seas, to the storm, hush, be still. And this is what he says to his disciples, hush, be still, when he says, where's your faith? Have you no faith? So make that connection, at least in your mind. He tells the ocean or the sea or the Israelites, hush, be still, and watch the power of God. His disciples are told, or rather, he tells the sea that's tormenting the boats and scaring these people, these fishermen who have experience with storms and know that this is a storm that could kill them. He tells them, hush, be still. They've already seen Jesus do some things, and their faith is not where it needs to be, but it's growing. It's going. So upon Jesus waking up, he calms the sea with only a word, only a phrase, hush, be still, and rebukes them for being afraid and having little faith. This miracle leaves them awestruck. They had no power over the storm and were at its mercy. They knew that as fishermen, as seamen, that the only thing that they could do was row, pull the sails down, and be at the mercy of the sea. But here Jesus did something that they could not do. They controlled the hurricane, they controlled the tsunami, or rather he controlled the tsunami, whatever kind of storm it was, Jesus stopped it. Jesus demonstrated that he had authority over the natural elements. Their unstated conclusion was that only God could do something like this. Look at that last verse. There in verse 41. They became very much afraid and said to one another, who then is this, that even the wind and the sea obey him? They couldn't do it. They didn't know anyone that could do it. And their question is, who is he? Who is this man? They can only, he's the only one that can do this. So he is the Lord of nature. And we move on now to the next section. In chapter 5 and verse 1, where he becomes, or he's recognized as the Lord of the spirit world. They came to the other side of the sea, into the countryside, or into the country of the Gerasenes. And when he got out of the boat, immediately a man from the tombs with an unclean spirit met him. I've tried to picture this in my mind. They've been battered by the storm. They've been rebuked by Jesus. And the first thing they see is this crazy man coming to them with a legion of demons. They might themselves look a little bit like this demon-possessed man after this whole storm ordeal. But here's this unclean spirit, and he comes to meet Jesus. He didn't pick out Peter or James or John. He picked out Jesus. And there's a reason why he picked out Jesus. And he had his dwelling among the tombs, and no one was able to bind him anymore, even with a chain, because he had often been bound with shackles and chains, and the chains had been torn apart by him, and the shackles broken in pieces, and no one was strong enough to subdue him. Constantly, night and day, he was screaming among the tombs and in the mountains, and gashing himself with stones. And seeing Jesus from a distance, he ran up and bowed down before him. And shouting with a loud voice, he said, "What business do we have with each other, Jesus, Son of the Most High God? I implore you, by God, do not taunt me." For he had been saying to him, "Come out of the man, you unclean spirit." And he was asking him, "What is your name?" And he said to him, "My name is Legion." And notice that the word Legion is capitalized because of proper name. For we are many. And he began to implore him earnestly not to send them out of the country. Now there was a large herd of swine feeding nearby on the mountain. The demons implored him, saying, "Send us into the swine so that we may enter them." And Jesus gave them permission, and coming out, the unclean spirits entered the swine, and the herd rushed down the steep bank into the sea, about 2,000 of them, and they were drowned in the sea. Their herdsmen ran away and reported it in the city and in the country, and the people came to see what it was that had happened. And they came to Jesus and observed the man who had been demon-possessed sitting down, clothed and in his right mind, the very man who had the legion, and they became frightened. Now those who had seen it described to them how it had happened to all the demon-possessed man, or to the demon-possessed man, and all about the pigs. And they began to implore Jesus to get out of their city. And as he was getting in the boat, the man who had been demon-possessed was begging Jesus that he might go with him. But Jesus did not let him. But he said to him, "Go home. Go home to your own people and report to them what great things the Lord has done for you and how he had mercy on you." And he went his way and began to proclaim in Decapolis what great things Jesus had done for him. And everyone was amazed. Should I say everyone except some people, and those were the business owners. Now, notice before I delve into some points I want to make from this text, that this demon-possessed man ran to Jesus and bowed down before him. Was it the demon-possessed man, or was it the legion that came and bowed down to Jesus? I know that it was the body of the demon-possessed man, but was it the legion that did it?
Was the legion gone by now?
No,
Mm-mm.
no, because he's imploring Jesus to not send them
Oh, there,
back to
okay.
hell.
I would say it was the Legion.
Yeah.
Seems like
Because
it.
he knew that this was God. He knew this
Yeah.
was Jesus.
Yeah.
And he knew that he was under his control.
And then remember when Jesus healed the 10 lepers? They came to Jesus and begged him for healing. And then when he was in the Pharisee's house, and the prostitute comes and washes his feet and is drying his feet with her hair, she is kneeling down at his feet, and Pharisee is just judging her. It seems to me that it's those who understand, at least in the gospel accounts, those who truly understand that they're spiritually bankrupt are the ones that recognize Jesus for who he is. But it's those who are not spiritual or do not recognize that they're spiritually bankrupt, that they refuse to recognize who Jesus is. It's a lack of humility. The demons are willing to recognize Jesus and confess him. The ones that are sick with a terminal illness, like we're going to see here shortly, recognize Jesus because there's nowhere else to turn. Right?
Right.
Well, let's look at this demon-possessed man. He had an unclean spirit, and that's really a misnomer.
Yeah,
Because, an unclean spirit. And how many unclean spirits did he have?
Legion.
Do we know how much a legion is?
many.
Too many to count? Yeah, it is a lot. So immediately after they reach the other side of the lake, they're confronted by this man that's possessed of an unclean spirit. Jesus had cast out evil spirits in the past, but some people were unimpressed because the priests and Pharisees had also handled these types of cases. This time, however, Mark describes a man possessed by many demons, a legion, who could neither be cured nor restrained by anyone. And how does Mark tell us? How does Mark convey the idea that no one could restrain or control this man? How does he describe it?
No chains, nothing at all.
Chains or shackles, right? They would break loose. And who do you think was trying to chain him up and keep him shackled? The townspeople?
Yeah.
How about his family?
Yeah.
Well, the family was in a different area, remember? He said, go home to Decapolis,
Yeah.
and they weren't there. I don't think. I
Would
don't
you,
think.
would you want to keep someone like that in your house?
Mhm.
But he's your own kid.
Mhm. Oh, well.
That's why I
Uh-uh.
never got married.
Don't have to make those tough choices.
We're not talking about a crazy wife. We're talking about a crazy child.
Same thing.
Okay. But now, notice this. Those that are skeptics and believe that this is not an inspired book, or would say that Jesus is not God, will argue that this is a terrible case of someone being psychotic or schizophrenic. And what he needed were some drugs, some medicine. But we'll deal with that here shortly. Jesus cures him with simply a word, and the demons are cast out. This particular healing has these interesting features that you see on the screen. First of all, Jesus has a dialogue with the demons. And this was probably done to demonstrate to the man and his own people and his own disciples that he knew the problem and was without fear. And Jesus sends the demons into a nearby herd of pigs. Probably or perhaps to reassure the man that the demons were truly out of him and physically elsewhere. Or, as I have said before, that not even the demons want to go to hell. But I'm not sure. But this is where they went, to the swines, to the pigs. The pigs killed themselves, or the pigs went off the cliff and they died. So then where do those unclean spirits go? Well, during this time, God was allowing unclean spirits to possess people, but it was done for the glory of God, in order for them to be exercised and prove what the will of God was. So the destruction of the swine is sometimes questioned as being wasteful. Well, why would he kill all these pigs, whereas they could be used for commerce and for eating? Well, not for the Jews, because they were unclean. So I don't see why people would argue that. However, what's worth more, a man's life or a herd of pigs? Well, for some people, money's worth more than human life. Yes, sir.
So why do you suppose they said, don't send us out of the country and ask to be sent into the swine?
Well,
I mean, we probably don't know, but
well, there's two, in my mind, there's two possibilities. There might be a lot more, but the two that I entertain are, one, so that people could physically see, including the man, physically see that the demons left this man and went somewhere else. Physically, they could see where they went, into the pigs. Or the demons didn't want to go back to the netherworld, or to hell, wherever they came from.
okay.
But
If you just said go away and then they act normal, they go, well, but by seeing the swine and what they did, and if the swine just wouldn't have done anything, it still would have been that problem. But by them all hurting themselves, and
which brings me to the point of schizophrenia or a psychotic episode.
you can't transfer that to a pig.
Yes, had it been one of those episodes, had he been crazy, first of all, having a conversation like this, lucid conversation, and then sending the demons into the pigs, and then the man being normal, all these witnesses that had chained him and shackled him and dealt with him knew what kind of man he was, knew what kind of power, physical strength he had. And now all of a sudden they're witnesses of this amazing transformation with one word. Jesus cast them out. And then they also see, because they go and report to the swine owners, he sent the demons into the pigs and they're dead. And they became afraid. Why did they become afraid? I don't know. Maybe they thought that Jesus could send demons into them. I don't know why. But I know that the business owners were upset. They weren't happy with that. So this is one way that Jesus proves that this was not a psychotic episode. The man is completely sane. Act 2, you flip the page over, and we find the man sitting completely sane with clothes on. He's no longer naked, no longer gashing himself and beating his head and trying to hurt somebody or himself. But he's completely sane, dressed, and after many years of insanity and torment, he is sane. He's got control of his senses. Jesus is about to leave. And this man runs to him and he says, I want to go with you. Why do you think he would want to go with him? Now, the most obvious answer that many people give is, well, because he's grateful. He wants to go with the one that helped him. But let's try to think a little bit deeper than that surface answer. Why would this man, who had been chained and shackled by his townspeople, seen naked by everyone, why would he want to go with Jesus?
The spirit in him is attracted to him. He wants to go with Jesus, the good part of, because he was with evil so much, he was attracted to the opposite side now.
So he wants to go with good.
Plus, like you said, everybody in town, they just seen how he was, and they'd still be staring at him after that. They'd be,
That, yeah.
Well, he had so much power before. He was he was a pain to them.
Yeah.
That's why they tried shackling him up and everything else.
Yeah.
Now he had no power. And so he might be worried about what they might do to him.
Oh, retribution.
So when we come to Jesus, we're a new child
Mhm.
and there's a new life. Could it be possible that he wanted to start a new life
Mhm.
somewhere else
That's why I meant he's attracted, he wants to go with that.
where he's not known? But Jesus wants us to use our scars, because where he gashed himself and hurt himself, he wants us to use our scars to
Mhm.
tell a story. And that's what he says to me. You have people at home. They know you and they know who you were. But, well, they know who you were, but they don't know who you are now. So go tell them who you are now and tell them who did this to you.
And it's interesting because so many of the other miracles, he told them that he performed a miracle on.
Don't say
Go tell nobody. Keep it to
Mhm.
yourself. Here he said, you go tell them. Tell them what great things the Lord's done.
Now, there's a reason for that. One, when he tells them, don't tell anyone, is because Jesus was going to stay in that town and still continue ministering. This one, Jesus is getting out of Dodge, right? Go tell everybody, right? And he's leaving.
Plus, this guy wasn't from that area. Jesus wasn't gonna go where he was gonna go, to Decapolis or whatever. That's on the other side of the Jordan,
That's true.
so.
Very true. So after demonstrating that he had power over the natural world, Jesus shows his disciples that he has power over the spiritual world. He overcomes nature in the outside world. He overcomes the demons in the inside world. And now we're left with the conclusion that if only God has power over nature and demons, Jesus therefore must be divine. There's no other conclusion.
Mhm.
Which brings us to the next section, verse 21. Forget to advance the slides. I'm sorry. If you needed to take notes, there's the notes on the next slide. Mark 5, verse 21. Did you need to see that?
No.
Mark 5 and verse 21. When Jesus had crossed over again in the boat to the other side, a large crowd gathered around him. And so he stayed by the seashore. One of the synagogue officials named Jairus came up and on seeing him fell at his feet and implored him earnestly, saying, "My little daughter is at the point of death. Please come and lay your hands on her so that she will get well and live." And he went off with him, and a large crowd was following him and pressing in on him. A woman who had a hemorrhage for 12 years and had endured much at the hands of many physicians and had spent all that she had and was not helped at all, but rather had grown worse. After hearing about Jesus, she came up in the crowd behind him and touched his cloak. For she thought, if I just touch his garments, I will get well. And immediately the flow of her blood was dried up, and she felt in her body that she was healed of her affliction. And immediately Jesus, perceiving in himself that the power proceeding from him had gone forth, turned around in the crowd and said, "Who touched my garments?" And his disciples said to him, "You see the crowd pressing in on you, and you ask, 'Who touched me?'" And he looked around to see the woman who had done this. But the woman, fearing and trembling, aware of what had happened to her, came and fell down before him and told him the whole truth. And he said to her, "Daughter, your faith has made you well. Go in peace and be healed of your affliction." This is a 2-for-1. This is a 2-for-1 story here. The synagogue's official, Jairus, he's like a modern day minister, what we call a preacher. His daughter was ill to the point of death, and he is seeking Jesus's help, which means that if he was a synagogue official, he had the means to get medical help. And that tells me that no one was able to heal her. So in these two cases, Jairus's daughter and then this lady who had an issue of blood, both had already tried to get medical help, and in both cases, the doctors had failed. So what does that mean?
Just suffered with, she just needed some help. She was weak and
Well, both the
Needed
daughter
more
and the
than man
woman,
to fix it.
yeah, they needed outside help. They needed divine help.
Divine help, yeah.
Now, something that you might not have noticed before, both of these are women. One of them has a disease, an illness that's going to kill her. Eventually, well, by the time Jesus gets to her, she's dead. I don't know what disease it was, but the other one has a female problem. She's bleeding from her uterus. She has a female problem. And she's had it for 12 years. Men in those years, those days, didn't understand this type of problem. Medical technology had not advanced, or medical knowledge had not advanced that much. So immediately, this woman, when she touched the hem of Jesus's garment, well, first of all, Jesus is confronted by a synagogue official. And this Jairus' daughter, she is ill to the point of death. He begs Jesus to come to heal her, and Jesus agrees. But on his way, he's interrupted by this woman. She secretly touches the hem of his garment, or the cloak. I believe another scripture says, or another version says that, with the hope of being healed from her own disease. How did Jairus and this woman know that they needed to go to Jesus?
Well, that he had gone over and then it said he went back, and there was much people there. They had probably heard of him, seen or heard of the miracles he had
Don't
done.
tell anybody.
Yeah, but
They do anyway.
they were being told,
Yeah.
and they knew.
So when this woman that touched the cloak, Jesus's cloaks, she suffered from continual, seems like uterine bleeding. And her condition, she says, has bankrupted her financially. And according to the Jewish ceremonial law, she was not allowed to attend temple worship because she was considered ceremonially unclean. For 12 years, she's dealing with this. And the woman is immediately healed. But notice what Jesus forces her to do. She forces her to acknowledge her illness, what she had done, and the results. Who touched me? And she says, well, I did. And then she explains what happened or why she did it. And there's a reason why Jesus says, who touched me? What do you think the reason is? It's in the crowd. The disciples said, well, look how many people are around. What do you mean, who touched you?
I think it's to confirm what he's doing, to confirm the miracle.
To whom?
To
Everybody around.
everybody.
Yeah,
Everybody.
that's right.
Because why he wouldn't say that to her otherwise. And even his disciples said, what are you talking about? How in the world are you going to know who touched you? All these people are around you like this. It's a mob.
Yeah.
Yeah, the reason for this is, as you say, was to publicly declare the miracle and to verify that she was healed and could now return to worship in the temple. She's clean.
And the other thing is, it showed her faith. It showed her faith because she had this issue for 12 years, and the doctors had done everything, and she knew and heard about Jesus, and she said, if I could just touch his garment. So think of the faith that she had to push and press to get there to do that. That's amazing. I mean, I've only been in a crowd once where it was so tight that you couldn't even hardly move. And there's no way you'd know who touched you,
Pickpocket.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
this disease that had been treated unsuccessfully for years is a lot different than the demoniac that had a legion of demons. This was not a mental disease. Could never be confused as a mental disease. It's a uterine disease. 12 years of blood flowing from her body.
I didn't know and she knew immediately that she was healed. That's what I can't understand.
Yeah.
Well, a woman knows.
Yeah.
I mean, I've found that out. A woman knows when it's happening and when it's not happening.
It
Straight
would be
away.
exhausting.
Yeah.
It would be tiresome. It would be so taxing on your body.
That was uniquely female in nature. And Jesus heals her without saying a word. This time he didn't even say a word.
What I think is amazing is that not only did he not say a word, but he didn't know. His power was so great that he healed somebody by her faith without him even knowing about it. If that makes sense.
Yeah, without directing his attention, without
Mhm.
him talking to her, or yeah. So
But he knew. Because he knows everything.
well, yeah,
You know.
but what Becky is saying is that
Set
it
of
wasn't
goals.
like having the conversation with the demon possessed man or anyone else. I mean, he was his concentration was, I'm going to Jairus's house to heal his daughter. So in this we see that his lordship was expressed by his mere presence, without having to say a word, without saying your faith has healed you, or hush, be still, or demons leave.
Is that the way he knows we are? How can I say? He's healing us and he never talks to us, really.
Without directing his, yeah,
Yeah, so he
Not
heals us
face-to-face.
and it's kind of the same way.
that's right. Well, look at verse 35, because he hasn't, I told you it's a 2-for-1. And there's only one so far. And she wasn't the one that he was going to see first, or at all. As Becky says, she wasn't the targeted audience.
Oh, right, yeah.
So verse 35, while he was still speaking, they came from the house of the synagogue official saying, your daughter's dead. Don't trouble the teacher anymore. But Jesus, overhearing what was being spoken, said to the synagogue official, don't listen to that. There's no reason to listen to that nonsense. Don't be afraid any longer. Only believe. And he allowed no one to accompany him except Peter, James, and John, the brother of James. And they came to the house of the synagogue official, and he saw a commotion, and people loudly weeping and wailing. And entering in, he said to them, why make such a commotion, and why weep so much? The child has not died, but is asleep. And they began laughing at him. How does it turn from weeping and wailing and making such a commotion to laughing at him? One of the things that was common in the Jewish culture was that of professional mourners.
Mhm.
People would be hired, the family would hire people to come and mourn, put on a show. For whatever reason, that was part of the culture. And the girl just died, so I think that's probably not the case here. But it seems like it, because now they're laughing at Jesus. Or maybe it's not laughing, but snickering. But whatever it is, they don't believe Jesus. But putting them all out, he took along the child's father and mother and his own companions, Peter, James, and John. So how many people are going to be in the room total? The girl, mom and dad, Peter, James, and John, and Jesus. How many are those? 7. And entered the room where the child was. And taking the child by the hand, he said to her, Talitha Kuma, which translated means, little girl, I say to you, get up. Man, 2 words in that language and all these other words in English. Immediately the girl got up and began to walk, for she was 12 years old. And immediately they were all astounded. And she said, give me some food. Right? Now, and what's the sign of feeling better? Food. And he gave them strict orders that no one should know about this, and he said something should be given to her to eat. Well, I mean, don't say anything. Well, everybody outside already knew that she was dead. But anyhow, give her something to eat. You know, one of the interesting things when Jesus resurrected and appeared to his disciples, they had a barbecue, didn't they? Yeah, grilled fish.
Oh, on the seashore, yeah.
Yeah, on the seashore. I said this in Alabama once. I said, "Oh, it wasn't barbecue. That was grilled fish." Listen, pulled pork might be barbecue for some, brisket for others, rib, but for these people, they didn't eat pork.
Yeah.
So fish on a grill with coals underneath, they had barbecue. It was time to celebrate.
Is there a connection with the 12 years on both of them?
I don't know.
Okay, I just wondered, because
I don't know if there's a connection or not. But here, Mark continues this narrative with the story of the synagogue leader's daughter, and report comes that she's dead. And Jesus says, no, she's not. There's no reason for you to worry yourself about that, because she's not. You just need to believe. And it seems to me that Jairus was with Jesus. Well, I know he was. He was with Jesus when this lady with the issue of blood had been healed. And I can only imagine what's going on in Jairus' mind. Let's go already.
Right. Don't stop for this, man. Let's go.
I mean, it's like when you dial 911. If somebody's having a heart attack or something's happened in your house and you want the ambulance, and then the 911 dispatcher said, what's your address? You give it to him. And what's going on?
how'd that happen?
Yeah, my husband's had a heart attack. How old is he? What's his race? How many people are in the house? Just get here already, right? And I can only imagine now, Jairus is deflated when he hears that his daughter's dead. But when he arrives at his house, these professional mourners, if that's what they are there along with a crowd of people who laugh as he announces that this little girl is not dead. And Jesus doesn't need them around. He doesn't need people like that around or inside the house. And Mark here demonstrates Jesus' lordship over another powerful enemy of man, death itself. So here we see that Jesus is the Lord over, or that Jesus is the one with divine power to overcome those things which man has traditionally had little or no control over: nature, the spirit world, illness, and death. And the only conclusion that we can come up with is that only God can have and demonstrate this kind of power. Therefore, Jesus must be God. Any questions? Next week we'll cover chapter 6.
It was nice. As soon as they said your daughter's dead, why are you troubling the master? And as soon as he heard it, Jesus said, be not afraid, only believe. So he like, just don't worry yet. Don't worry yet. Because otherwise, by the time they would have got everybody out and got the, he'd have been a basket case by the time.
But for whose benefit is he doing all of this? Do not be afraid, but believe.
All of it.
The 12 apostles. Think about this. all these people are experiencing personal turmoil in their lives. The woman, 12 years of the issue of blood, Jairus losing his daughter, the demon possessment, all of these people are personal tragedies. The 12 are going to have to learn to have faith during their ministry of the Great Commission, because they're all going to suffer to the point of death. And they're going to need enough faith to get to that point of death in order to fulfill their Great Commission. So every one of these miracles is building, laying a foundation and building upon that foundation of their own faith to be able to fulfill that commission until the Lord comes again, or until they die, which they died. Next week, any questions or comments from those in Zoom land?
Padre,
Yes, sir.
you know, it's funny, these TV evangelists and all these people that heal folks, every miracle in the Bible happened immediately. And I think people overlook that a lot.
That is true. And you know, when I had a debate with a Pentecostal, that the debate was on modern day miracles, and it only went for two speeches, his speech and my speech, one night, and it was supposed to go on for 5 nights. But after he made his first 30-minute speech and I got to make my speech, I said that we could finish the debate that very night, and he could win the debate by doing one thing. They had a cemetery behind the building. And I said, you raise the first one and I'll raise the second one. And then it's over with. And he said that I was challenging the Holy Spirit. And I said, no, I'm challenging you. And the debate, he didn't want to continue on with the debate. But when Jesus performed miracles along with the disciples and the first century Christians, they had the gift of the Holy Spirit, these gifts rather, these miraculous gifts. There was no hesitation in the results. It was immediate. And there was no accusation of testing the Spirit. They actually did it to prove that what they were saying was from God. So any modern day miracle worker should be happy to prove that what they're saying is coming from God and not say that the Spirit is being tested. But it doesn't happen. All right, God bless. Next week, 10:30, Lord willing.